Today we observe a black day as we stand in solidarity with our Kashmiri brethren as they struggle for self-determination and freedom. Violations against human rights and both violations on the line of control have escalated and continue. Both the governments of Azad Jammu and Kashmir and Pakistan are making every effort to bring this out to the world, to highlight this issue to the world so that the world can react and realize that Kashmir is fast becoming a nuclear flashpoint. To talk about all of these issues, we have with us a very special guest today, none other than the President of Azad Jammu and Kashmir, Sardar Masood Khan. Thank you so much for taking out the time to talk with us, Mr. President.
Thank you so much for having me.
Human rights violations in India have continued even after the abrogation of the articles, and you've seen and we've all seen the way that there is a renewed vigor against the Muslims, against the Kashmiris in Indian occupied Kashmir. In your opinion, why does it continue when we've seen that the rhetoric, anti-Muslim rhetoric, the rhetoric against tolerance that Modi has brought forward has already brought fruit as far as his elections are concerned. We've seen that it has. But in your opinion, is there something more to it, considering that we've seen a lot of things are being said about the Indian economy and the fact that unemployment is on the rise? Do you think that it's more a diversion now for them, for the people of India, as far as Modi is concerned, when he continues this kind of extremism and this kind of violations, the violations against human rights that are nothing short of what happened in Nazi Germany?
You're absolutely right, but you've raised a number of questions, and let me address all of them one by one. In your introductory remarks, you said that today we are marking a Black Day because way back in 1947, on the 27th of October, India occupied this territory, chunk of the Jammu and Kashmir state, illegally. They committed aggression at that time. So India has been in occupation of that territory for the past 72 years. Right. And the Kashmiris there have been demanding that India should vacate that territory, Indian occupation forces should vacate that territory, and they should allow the United Nations to hold a plebiscite. Right. And India was blocking that. Right. India was blocking that referendum or exercise of the will of the Kashmiri people even before the rise of Narendra Modi, before 2014. Right. So that factor is the old government, whether it was the Congress government or whether it was the BJP government. Right. They have really committed horrendous crimes against humanity in the Indian occupied Kashmir, and according to our count, since 1947, about 500,000 Kashmiris have been killed, and women have been raped, and young men have been killed and maimed and tortured, and enforced disappearances and fake encounters, and so there's a human rights crisis there. But you asked very pertinent questions about Modi's idea or his ideology. This is an ideology which believes that the South Asian subcontinent belongs to Hindus or to the upper class Hindus, and that Muslims or Christians or Sikhs or Dalits, for instance, have no place in this land. They say that this is Bharat Bhumi and its purity has to be restored. And that's why they have targeted Kashmir, as you rightly said. They've also said that they would disintegrate Pakistan by the use of military force, including the use of nuclear weapons. And they have also said that they would disenfranchise Muslims. They are asking their population, and it's not a small population. It is probably more than 200 million people there, and they are not a minority, they are a plurality. They are asking them to accept India's or Hindu way of life or just leave the place. Right. So I think that you were absolutely right when you said that what is happening in Kashmir, in South Asia right now, is directly comparable to what happened during Hitler's brutal rule in Germany last century.
Right, and And going to the second part of my question, do you think part of it has to do with the way things are in India, as far as as Modi seems to be in a fix as far as the economy is concerned, and questions are being raised, about the fact that unemployment is on the rise and things are not all rosy across the border as far as economy is concerned. So for him to continue this mantra and to to continue this kind of hatred, do you think part of it has to do with that?
Yes, I mean, international economists are saying that India's economy is tumbling down, that its GDP growth has suffered in the recent past. It has come down to 5%. And India was touted as this emerging market all over the world, an emerging economic power. But people's expectations in regard to India in the economic sphere are being frustrated. So this is one factor. But let me tell you that Narendra Modi and his cohorts, they want to silence dissent. I mean, they want to redefine history. They are, for instance, saying that Nehru and Gandhi were not the real leaders of India, that it was either Sardar Patel or their own leaders, the founders of the Bharatiya Janata Party or the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, this extremist version of Hindu nationalism. So I think this is a mix of factors. I mean, there's this doctrinal frenzy, and there's also the slowdown in economy. There's also, they need this kind of glue to put together this very fragile state. It's a very fragile federation, and they need this glue, and the glue that Bharatiya Janata Party or Narendra Modi has chosen is the glue of hatred against Pakistan. They incite hatred against Pakistan and Muslims, and that's how they manage to unite their electorate or the nation.
Another issue that's, another thing that's come forefront is the statements by the Indian Chief of Army Staff. They're clearly filled with hatred, and the ISPR has said that they're more motivated by him trying to become the defense head of India. Do you think that at the cost of sabotaging peace in this region, he's of course putting personal gain front, do you think that that's a theme as far as Modi-led government is concerned?
Bipin Rawat's statements are very provocative and very aggressive, and he is doing so deliberately. In fact, he sounds like a spokesperson of the BJP, the Bharatiya Janata Party, instead of being the army chief. He has no business commenting on political matters. And he peddles this kind of jingoism to prove that India is muscular, that he is in charge and so on. But I think he's being encouraged by the BJP and other extremist forces in India. Let me tell you the themes that he has. One is that he says that he would attack Azad Kashmir and retake it, and he has no mandate to do that. Because by doing so, he wants to make Pakistan defensive. We react that we won't let him attack Azad Kashmir, and he wants to divert attention from the atrocities of the Indian occupation forces in the occupied territory and just divert attention from IOK to Azad Kashmir. This is one motive. Second is that, to tell you the truth, the Indian Army Chief, the BJP, they're all scared. They have taken this step in IOK, but they can't manage the situation. For God's sake, I mean, they have incarcerated the entire population. Some 9.5 million people have been confined to their houses. And there's this anger and reaction against India. India knows that this anger is palpable and it would hit India. They would strike back. The population of Kashmir would strike back. So that's why they are nervous, and they are substituting their nervousness with this angry, vitriolic rhetoric against Pakistan and against Azad Kashmir. So we understand the dynamics there, because they would not be able to manage the situation in the Indian occupied Kashmir, whether it is Jammu and Kashmir or Ladakh.
Even, the Prime Minister Imran Khan said that as far as Modi is concerned, as far as he's concerned, he's played his last card. And now there's no other way, and he realizes that, like you said, perhaps things are going to be very difficult for him to control in IOK, like you mentioned.
Yes, absolutely. And I would tell you that Muslims in South Asia and ultimately Muslims all over the world will not take Modi's threats or his drive against Muslims lying down. They would react. They are reacting, in fact. I mean, and we are glad that the Western world has reacted, at least its media has reacted, and its parliaments are speaking up for the Kashmiris, and they are criticizing India's actions. So the scenario is changing very rapidly, and India is living in this make-believe world, an anachronistic world, a medieval world where they believe that they can incarcerate or besiege an entire population, occupy their territory, brutalize them, and subjugate them. It is not likely to happen in this day and age. Kashmiris have given sacrifices. They are ready to give more sacrifices. Behind Kashmiris are standing the people of Azad Kashmir and the people of Pakistan, and now increasingly the freedom-loving international community. So I think that yes, it is for us now to respond and react proportionately and effectively to this challenge which has been given by Narendra Modi.
Mr. President, you mentioned the reaction of the Western world and also the reaction of the Muslim countries. Let's talk about the reaction of the Muslim countries. Do you feel that perhaps their reaction could have been more effective at this time for the Kashmiris?
You're absolutely right. The reaction of the Islamic community or the Islamic Ummah or the OIC could have been and should have been more effective. But very few people in Pakistan know that the OIC has issued a strong communique which condemns Indian actions, which demands that human rights violations and repression in Kashmir should come to an end. And it has demanded the realization of the right to self-determination for the people of Jammu and Kashmir. So the OIC has stood by you as a body. But there were 2 or 3 countries which in fact awarded and rewarded Mr. Modi in the aftermath of the steps taken on August the 5th. And that disappointed people here in Pakistan. And I think that our state, the state of Pakistan, is working on them and is trying to persuade them to understand the dynamics of Indian actions and the serious repercussions that these steps would have for the region, for the Kashmiris, and for peace and security in the region. So our task is to win them over, not criticize them, because these very countries that we're talking about in the recent past helped Pakistan economically. When we were facing economic difficulties, they were very generous in their support to Pakistan.
That's a very noble approach. But let's go on and talk about the 5 permanent members of the UN. We've seen, do you feel that there is some thawing there? Do you feel that perhaps they're more sympathetic to the Kashmiri cause now than ever before? As far as America is concerned, China, there is France, Russia. Do you think that perhaps that there is some change there, a noticeable change? You've also served in the UN. How do you see it?
Well, I think that the informal session, which was convened on August the 16th, after the August the 5th decisions by India, was historic in a sense because this meeting took place after 50 years. So after a long spell of silence, the Security Council decided to focus actively on the issue of Jammu and Kashmir. But that informal session was held at the behest of Pakistan, or at the request of Pakistan, and it was facilitated by China. I'm really surprised that the United Nations Security Council had to wait for a communication from the Foreign Minister of Pakistan and a request supported by China to hold an informal session, and that informal session ended without a formal statement, presidential statement. because these presidential statements are anodyne and they are not binding, but the Council could not manage even that kind of statement. That said, I would say that we are grateful to these countries like the United States, United Kingdom, France, Russian Federation, who did not block this session. They could have, because these are veto-wielding powers, but they did not block the session. So there is this flexibility that you mentioned. But the body as a whole has disappointed the people of Jammu and Kashmir and the people of Azad Kashmir in Pakistan and the international community. Why? Because in accordance with the Charter of the United Nations, it is incumbent on this organization, on this body, the Security Council, to hold meetings continuously on Kashmir until it resolves the current crisis and the long delayed implementation of its own resolutions. You know, what's happening in Kashmir right now? As I speak to you, Kashmir is being brutalized. There's genocide happening there. India is committing crimes against humanity. It is committing war crimes. These have been recorded by Indian civil society and by the independent media networks all around the world. And because of the aggravating and aggressive statements given by the Indian leaders, there's this threat to peace and security in the region. India has whipped up this war psychosis. So against this backdrop, I think it is the responsibility of the Security Council to intervene, to hold sessions, and to come to some decisions in regard to Kashmir. So I would say that clearly when the Security Council is not demonstrating that kind of activity, there is a dereliction of duty and responsibility.
Certainly, and with this kind of background, the fact that you were able to revive the Kashmir question in the UN must have taken a lot of effort.
I think it did. I mean, India lobbied hard with all the countries, with the permanent members, non-permanent members, and they wanted to block this meeting, but Pakistan succeeded. And I think that the Security Council had no choice but to focus on this issue because the situation was deteriorating and India had taken these criminal, unlawful steps to unilaterally alter the disputed status of the occupied territory.
Let's talk about America. We've seen, what about the American reaction? We've seen how the offer of mediation panned out as far as Donald Trump is concerned. We've seen how India reacted to that. They went on the back foot. They said, you know, it happened, it didn't happen. That kind of, we've seen that kind of reaction. Do you think that there is a noticeable change towards the American approach to Kashmir at this time? And, you know, of course, they have their own interests at this time, the Afghanistan being, you know, a huge factor. That could be behind it. But regardless of what it is, do you think that it is there?
Well, I'll be more cautious. I would like to put American stance on Kashmir in a gray zone, as a matter of fact. And this would be a benign interpretation. You know, but there have been new nuances in American policy towards Kashmir. Right. You would recall that when Prime Minister of Pakistan was in Washington, D.C. with the President of the United States, Donald Trump, he offered mediation. And it was rejected by India. But even after India's reaction, President Trump continued to make that offer, although later on he made it conditional upon India's acceptance of that offer. Pakistan had already welcomed it and accepted that offer. The acting Secretary of State, Alice Wells, has issued statements, some of them supportive, some of them objective, others partisan. I mean, because you know that the United States and India have very close ties. Yeah. And therefore, in the hearing that was held recently on October the 22nd in Washington, D.C., in one of the subcommittees of the U.S. Congress, her statements, the statements of Alice Wells, were not very supportive of the Kashmiris. it appeared, gave the impression that she was trying to defend India, or she was giving a cover to Indian actions. But later on, she issued some very categorical and forthright statements. So I would say that their own policy seems to be evolving. One thing is clear, that America is no more tight-lipped on Kashmir, and it is ready to make statements from time to time. Let me tell you, when we talk about America, we talk about official America, like official Washington, D.C., right. But it should include the U.S. Congress, and U.S. Congress, there more than 50 congressmen have protested against India's actions. They've written letters demanding restoration of telecommunication links and end to the security lockdown. They have also spoken up for the rights of the Kashmiris. As very influential senators have written letters to the President of the United States asking him to intervene to stem this deterioration of the situation in the occupied territory. So, and then I would go to the media. The media has been very supportive. They've been very objective. They've been collecting evidence. Yeah. The mainstream American media, they've been collecting evidence from the occupied territory, the territory which is under siege right now. And despite India's intimidation, they have continued to report objectively. Recently, I was in the United States and I spoke to many think tanks and human rights organizations and media networks. They were keen to report on Kashmir and in fact persuade their own government to be more vocal and more active in regard to Kashmir.
Do you think a part of that, the reaction, so to speak, of the United States, do you think it has to do with the situation in Afghanistan? As a diplomat yourself, you must know, and you know that there is certainly those considerations are always at play as far as world politics is concerned.
Certainly there are linkages, and Afghanistan is a factor. Afghanistan, resolution of the situation in Afghanistan, an end to conflict, and disengagement of the United States is a priority for the US government. And they know that Pakistan's role in resolving this issue is critical. And therefore, I mean, they approached Pakistan this year. They reached out to us, and Pakistan was helpful. Pakistan's role has been very constructive because Pakistan wants peace and stability in Afghanistan.
But we've also changed as far as our relationship, or our reciprocal, I would say, relationship to the US is concerned, a little, haven't we?
Yes, but let me tell you, I mean, following up on your the question that you had put me, I would say that this Afghanistan, or the Indian actions, in fact, split our attention, split Pakistan's attention. I mean, you have to, while you were trying to help the Americans or other stakeholders, India took this very outrageous step on our eastern border. This raises questions about the relocation of troops to the eastern border to defend Pakistan's territory and Azad Kashmir, because India has been threatening to attack, invade, not just AJK, but also Azad Kashmir and Pakistan. So, but Pakistan and the United States moved closer to each other, I mean, because of the Afghanistan factor, and now they want to get involved in the mediation also. When President Trump says that he wants to offer mediation, in fact, he is speaking on behalf of the United States. Let's see how this offer unfolds.
But we've seen, to be honest, we've seen Donald Trump say that, he would like to mediate. And then we've seen him say that he would also like that both Pakistan and India sort out their issues. So we've seen, like you said, we've seen the US say different things at different times. And that's not new, unfortunately. That has happened before also. But regardless of that, you have also talked about the fact how India has a close relationship with the US and historically does that, have that. Even with that kind of background, we've seen India reject whether candidly or at other times cagely, I would say, reject the offer of mediation. What are they fearful of? Do you think that they're fearful that their true face will be exposed to the world? The kind of propaganda that they've been playing for a long time now, and the way they've been promoting India as a tolerant state will be exposed. Do you think part of that is that?
You said it. In fact, you've answered the question yourself. I can tell you that India has so much to hide. It is committing crimes against humanity, and it is pursuing ethnic cleansing. It is violating international law, international humanitarian law, and the Geneva Conventions, Security Council resolutions. It has so much to hide, and therefore it doesn't want to accept any kind of mediation or third-party involvement or third-party process. But this doesn't solve the problem. India's denial of the problem doesn't solve the problem, because Kashmiris have made it clear to India that they would not live with India, and they consider India's rule and writ illegal. There are many forms of mediation or multilateral diplomacy. It could be third-party mediation, it could be a man of high stature or a statesman, or it could be the Security Council itself. It is primarily the responsibility of the Security Council to resolve this issue. So I think that while we should continue to talk about third-party mediation or the offer of President Donald Trump, we realize that right now the United States posture in this regard is unpredictable. But one thing is certain, that the Security Council must take cognizance of the situation, and under Chapter 6 or 7 of the Charter, explore all possibilities for negotiation, conciliation, arbitration, or any kind of regional initiative, or exercise of or the use of good offices by the Secretary General.
As an experienced diplomat yourself, what about other policy options that you feel we can pursue at this time? We have tried to engage the international community, and like you said, international community has been engaged in a manner that perhaps it hasn't been before. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I agree. And you talked about policy options. We have several policy options. The international community, international media, and the social media, they have in fact crafted this new narrative for Kashmir, which is objective, which reflects and projects the voices of the Kashmiris, and shines the spotlight on Kashmir. So I think that what we should do, that we should interface and integrate ourselves with this evolving narrative, and we should become its champions. This is very important, which means that we should reach out to civil society, international media, and human rights organizations all over the world. In fact, not very surprisingly, many powerful voices in India have also criticized and castigated Modi's actions, and they have defended the rights of the Kashmiris, including their right to self-determination. Right. So I think that we need to interface with these liberal and freedom-loving voices in India. Second, I would say the policy option that we have, and I mean it has always been there, that we should be prepared for a war. India has threatened to obliterate Pakistan with a conventional war, and has not ruled out the possibility of the use of nuclear weapons. Pakistan has been put on notice, and so has Azad Kashmir, and we should prepare as a nation to defend ourselves. I'm not advocating an aggressive war, and India has already invaded Pakistan, or already attacked Pakistan by taking actions on August the 5th. I mean, when AJK is attacked and people are being brutalized, whom we consider to be our citizens and brothers and sisters, I think that we are in a state of war, so we should prepare for a war. And the third policy option that we have is that this new space in the diplomatic sphere has opened up on Kashmir. We should use it. We should use it, and we should seek a multilateral solution. We should not pin any hopes on a bilateral dialogue, because bilateral dialogues in the past have been totally counterproductive.
As far as India is concerned, there are times when threats are hurled from across the border. There's no denying that. And we've seen and we know that our armed forces are at all times prepared to defend Pakistan. We're a nuclear nation, and they should be aware that aware of that fact, and also of the fact that any sort of threat to peace for this region is not only a problem, is not going to create a havoc for the region itself, but also for the world. Isn't that true?
We're fighting a wider war. In fact, we are fighting many wars. India has invaded and reoccupied the Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. It is threatening to turn it into a colony, and it targets civilians across the line of control. In Azad Kashmir, some 80,000 families are affected directly by India's hostile fire. This year has been the worst year because 53 people have been martyred, hundreds of people have been handicapped or injured critically, houses and crops have been destroyed, livestock has been targeted as well. So this is the second war that we are fighting, and we are doing so valiantly, both the armed forces of Pakistan and the civilians. I'll talk about the role of the armed forces later. And then the third war is this proxy war, which India is prosecuting systematically in Balochistan and Karachi and many parts of Pakistan, including Fatah and so on. And they talk openly about this war. And then they also boast about a hybrid war that they have imposed on Pakistan. So we are fighting many wars, and as you were saying, that they are playing with fire, because Pakistan is showing restraint and responsibility, and yet it is a nuclear weapon state, that it can retaliate, and it can retaliate massively, and it can bring grievous harm to India. So I think that in this context, the role of the armed forces of Pakistan has been exemplary. They are defending our borders, and they have also been trying to target these subversive elements in different parts of Pakistan, which have been sponsored by India. Along the line of control, I mean, there has been this constant fire from Indian side, and they've been killing our civilians. Our soldiers posted there on those heights, inaccessible heights, in harsh conditions. They've been defending Azad Kashmir and Pakistan. And whenever Indians attack us, our civilians, the response from our side, from our armed forces, is robust. And they massively hit armed personnel. You know, the difference between Indian fire and our fire is that Indians target civilians, and our armed forces target only military positions or military posts, because the people living on that side of the line of control are in fact our citizens, our fellow citizens, our brothers and sisters. And our armed forces have also lost precious lives in defending the territory of Azad Kashmir. I'll also tell you that it is not adequately reported, but I think that our armed forces hit Indians heavily and initiate these punitive retaliations. I think they have, up to now, they have, this year alone, they have killed 100 Indian soldiers. But you were asking about our strategy, and I'd go to the last part, which is that we must make our diplomacy, our diplomatic outreach or diplomatic strategy more effectively, because India is not only targeting you operationally, it is also trying to sabotage and undermine Pakistan's position, and in fact Pakistan's sovereignty and Pakistan's standing in the international community, in the FATF, in the Security Council, even in the financial institution, international financial institutions. So this is an all-out war, and therefore we must mobilize all our resources to make our diplomacy, particularly multilateral diplomacy, more effective.
You spoke about this war against the atrocities by India being a multi-front war, and there's no denying that. We are at a point in history where wars are not only fought on the battlefield but also in the media. Also, war of narratives is a very important part of our presenting our own side to the world. Do you think that we're making effective headway with regard to putting our narrative across to the world, as opposed to India trying to paint itself as a tolerant nation, as opposed to the extremist and fascist India that is the reality of today?
You know, the voices of Kashmiris are being heard. The voice of Pakistan is being heard all around the world. And our narrative has been recently reinforced and buttressed by the international media. What we used to say has been substantiated by objective reports. So yes, there are our endeavors, but I think that India is making mistakes. India's face is now exposed all over the world. They know that it's a new fascist regime. They know that its extremist Hindutva policy is probably, or doctrine is probably worse than the Nazi or fascist doctrines of the last century. So, and they know what India is doing in Kashmir. The international community is also outraged. But you're absolutely right that most of this war would be fought, won and lost in the communication realm. And therefore, we have some tools, the people of Pakistan and the people of Azad Kashmir, the people of Jammu and Kashmir. But I think that in these circumstances, we need new tools and we need bigger toolboxes to meet this challenge.
What do you think will be the end of this extremist, fascist sentiment that's brewing in India? For India itself also, I mean, we've seen what is happening in Indian occupied Kashmir, and we've also seen that the spirit of the Kashmiris themselves, their children, their women, is undeterred. They continue to fight, whether they do that with stones or they do that with their spirit every day. But even as far as India is concerned, what kind of India are we going to see in the next couple of years if this continues?
Well, I want to make some quick points. First is that India is preparing for holocausts and pogroms and genocide in different parts of India, particularly in Kashmir. So this is a recipe for disaster, because India, if it pursues its policies, it has started pursuing these policies, would see death and destruction and devastation of the whole state of India, because we mustn't forget that it's a fragile state, as I said earlier. And therefore it doesn't just become the responsibility of the people of Kashmir or the people of Pakistan to stop this avalanche, this tide of hatred against humanity. This war, in fact, this struggle is between inhumanity and humanity. It is not between Hindus and Muslims, and it is not between the nationalisms of Pakistan and India. It is, as I said, it is a war, a fight between humanity and inhumanity. The second point that I want to make is that Pakistan has to focus simultaneously on its economic development, because India wants to use any weakness in Pakistan's economy to pursue its aggressive agenda in the region. So I mean, we need economic development or human development for the people of Pakistan, but we also need it to counter this offensive from India. And the last point that I want to say is that the people of Jammu and Kashmir, I salute them, without arms. They are fighting India's terror, India's terrorism, and they have demonstrated resilience. And we wholeheartedly support them. It is a pity that because of certain circumstances, we have not been able to intervene and break the siege which has been used by India to brutalize the people of Jammu and Kashmir. But we are with them, and we would continue to support them. And the Indian rulers or colonizers, they're trying to present to the world this image of a normal Jammu and Kashmir or normal Ladakh. Well, when you kill people, you torture them, you imprison them in their own houses, is it called normal situation? Let the Kashmiris say that the situation is normal, and they have gagged them completely. So what I want to emphasize here is that this kind of brutalization is a new normal for India, and it should not be accepted by the international community, and this kind of exceptionalism for India's hegemony and brutalization should be rejected by the international community.
Thank you so much for giving us your valuable time, Mr. President. Thank you so much for your input. As far as Kashmir is concerned, to quote the words of the President of Azad Kashmir himself, it is a war between humanity and inhumanity. It is a war, and it is not the responsibility of just Pakistan and Azad Jammu and Kashmir, but the responsibility of the world at this time to react to this very real crisis, to react to this, this kind of situation that can escalate and potentially be of danger, not only to the region here, but also to the whole world. Let's hope that the world will do that. Thank you so much for joining us.